Hi, I'm Jenny Fish from One Big Happy Yarn Company. We want to be your local yarn shop no matter where you are. Welcome back to our One Big Happy Toe Up Socks Knit Along. If you still need supplies, check out onebighappy.com. In the last episode, we knit up to the leg portion of the sock. Today I'll show you how to finish up with the cuff. Then we'll work a stretchy bind-off and block using our sock blockers. Let's get started. Okay, so we have this piece right here that we were knitting on, and we finished our heel, and we're knitting in the round. So I want to go ahead and just use this sample here to show you how to work the cuff. You can adjust these socks to whatever length that you want, and if you want a longer length, like the piece that I have here, you can slide this in, measure from the heel to where, however long you want the leg portion of your sock. And for me, I went ahead on this one and I knitted up to the top, up to the 8 right here so that it would match. On this one here, I'm just going to do a little shorty sock and show you how to work that ribbing. We are doing the cuff in a 2x2 ribbing. And what that means is we're going to knit 2, purl 2 all the way around. And I'll show you how we get that done here. Now, as we work this ribbing, we start out with, then I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, and I'm going to purl 1, purl 2. I'm going to repeat that all the way around. A couple of things that I want to go into with you on the leg portion of these socks is if you want to adjust any of your sizes here, feel free to. And what made me think of this is I was remembering a friend that I used to knit with, and her mom had lymphoma. Her legs were swollen, and she had one leg that was a lot larger than the other leg. And so she came to me and she's like, well, Jenny, how can I make these socks work for my mom? She wants a matching pair of socks, but she has one leg that's a normal size, and then the other leg is super swollen. And she really wants some warm, comfy socks, and I want to make her some. And so what we figured out was as we were working the leg portion of the sock, on the second sock, the first sock we knit like normal. On the second sock, as we were working this leg portion, we added in a bunch of increases to give more fabric so that it would fit for her mom. So that's something to think about when you're working this portion. It's super easy to do some increases. And as I'm working this ribbing, I'm going to show you those increases that you can use. You want to keep your increases in groups of 4 so that you'll stay symmetrical when you go to do your ribbing. Now here I've just knit 2. Let me purl 2 real quick and I'll show you how we can add in an increase here. There's a couple of different options. The first one I want to show you is a bar increase, or a make 1. It's where you pick this bar up and you slide it onto your needle. And I've got it going from basically back to front. And then I'm going to knit through the back loop. And the easiest way to get to that back loop is swoop in from the front and then poke through with the back needle. So I'm going to show you that again all the way from the beginning, because this does take a little bit of manipulation. So you have this bar that's going between your between your last stitch and your next stitch. You pick that up and you slide that on to your needle. Okay? Now I want to knit through that back loop. So I'm going to bring my right needle, scoop it, and then stick my left needle right through that. And now I'm ready to knit that stitch. And that's a make 1. So I've made that stitch. Another way to do an increase is knit through the front, then swoop around and knit through the back. And that's called a KFB, knit front back. And that also adds an increase. So doing that, I just added 2 stitches to this side of the fabric. Okay, now I can continue on in pattern. I'm going to purl the next stitch and knit 2, purl 2 all the way around. And I'm going to end this section here with a knit 2. Knit 2, purl 2. So you're going to go ahead and continue knit 2, purl 2, round and around until you get to the length for the cuff that you desire. In the pattern we have it at 1 inch, but you can do more or less, whatever you choose. But you want to go ahead and measure that and write that down, notate it on your pattern, so when you're making your second sock, you can match it up how you'd like it. So go ahead and finish your cuff. Okay, so once you finish your knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, your cuff will look something like this. See here where we have, this is the knit 2, this is the purl 2. It's super stretchy. That allows it to go over your foot and then shrink back on your leg. So once you have finished your ribbing, then we want to do a bind off or a cast off. And I really like what's called a stretchy bind off. And I want to show you how I do that. So let's grab my sample that I have over here. And we will work through this with you. So the idea of the stretchy bind off is to allow that cuff to stretch, to go over your foot, and then it comes back. We are going to bind off in pattern as well. That's something else. In pattern means that I am going to follow the knit 2, purl 2 ribbing as I bind off. And that also allows for a stretchy bind off. So what we're going to do here, okay, so my first 2 stitches here, and this is just my sample. You'll have, you know, your thickness of your cuff here. I'm going to knit the first stitch, then knit the second stitch, lift up and over. Now my next stitch on the needle is a purl, so I'm going to bring my yarn forward and I'm going to purl that. Now for me, I like to bring my yarn to the back before I lift this up and over, just to keep it out of the way. So I lift that stitch up and over. My next stitch is a purl stitch, so I'm going to bring my yarn to the front again, purl that stitch, take my yarn to the back, and lift that first one up and over. Now here is where I do my little stretchy binding. See this bar right here? I'm going to pick this bar up, stick it on my needle, and then I'm going to knit through the back loop. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm making one, and then I'm going to turn around and decrease it by lifting that stitch up and over, and that's binding that off. I'm adding just that little extra fabric after every purl, or after every set of purls. And I found for me that's a perfect stretchiness. It's not overstretched, and then it's still not, it's still in pattern and still looks nice. Okay, so my next stitch is a knit. You knit that stitch, lift the first one up and over. So I'm working 4 stitch in pattern, then I'm increasing 1 and binding it off right away. Now I'm back to the purl. Bring the yarn to the back, bind off, bring the yarn to the front. Now I've just worked the 2 purls, and I'll show you how to do that increase again. Okay, so I've just bound off purls. I'm going to pick this bar up in between the 2, slide it onto the needle, and then knit through the back loop. I've found bringing my yarn from the back up and around gets me into the position where I need to knit through the back loop, and then pick and lift it up and over that stitch. Now I'm back to the knit, and then here's my 2 purl stitches. So I bring my yarn to the front, I purl that stitch, lift that first stitch up and over, purl that stitch, lift that first stitch up and over. Okay, so now I'm back to where I'm going to add that extra stitch. And again, it's after every 4 stitches, but the way to keep track of that is that I'm knitting 2, purling 2, and then adding that extra stitch. and binding it off right away. I'll show you that one more time. I'm going to bring my needle from the back to the front, capture that bar, lift it on the needle. Then I'm going to swoop from back to front and up and over. That puts me into position to knit through the back loop. And the reason why we're knitting through the back loop instead of knitting through the front loop is so that we don't create an extra hole. When you are knitting through that back loop on that increase, it's twisting the bottom of that stitch to fill up that hole so you don't get a gap there. Because it seems a little backwards to be knitting through the back loop, and that's why we do that, to twist that stitch and close that gap. You'll go ahead and continue in pattern as you bind off all the way around. Then once you're done with that, I'll show you how to weave in the ends. Okay, so I have finished binding off all of my stitches. Here you can see how they look. Now, this last loop, I just wanted to show you how to finish that off before we weave in the ends. I'm going to go ahead and thread my bent tip tapestry needle. And it's pretty simple to finish this off. You go ahead and take the tail of your yarn and put it through the loop and then pull. And then what we want to do here to weave in these ends is go into the fabric next to there. Now remember, for yours, you're going to have the cuff built up. You're going to have more space there. This is just a sample so I can show you how to do the bind off and weave in these ends. I'm going to go back around here, and then I'm kind of going to go up and over to mimic what it looks like on these edge stitches, just so I can keep that consistent look right there. Okay, now I'm going to go back through here, mimicking that knitted look. Now on the underside of my work, you can do a duplicate stitch. You're going to have ribbing that looks like this right here. So you can go through these stitches and hide the tail of your yarn through there. But for me here, I'm just going to do a duplicate stitch. Now I've got two different colors here, so this is a good way to see what that looks like. I'm going to follow the line. I'm going to go under this bump here, go around, through, and down. Right through here. Then I'm going to come over here, up, and through like that. Oops. So anyway, you're going to continue weaving back and forth, following the path however you feel comfortable weaving in your ends for about an inch. That's going to keep it secure so that it won't come unraveled on you. Okay, let me finish this up just a little bit more here. Okay, just like that. It's a duplicate stitch on the other side. You cannot see it. Isn't that lovely? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and clip this. Now I have one more end down here at the toe. That's the great thing about these socks. Knit it all from one ball of yarn. I only have two ends to weave in. Okay, so on this one, I am going to thread my needle, and then I'm going to poke it through. If you do, here's another thing while you're weaving in your ends. You want to look at your toe and make sure that you don't have any gaps. So I'm going to slide my hand through here. On this one, I did that pretty well. There's no gaps there. But if you do happen to have a gap, another way to close it up is you can use your tail as you're weaving in your ends to close up that gap. But I also want to show you the inside of this sock. Look at this beauty. There's no seam across your toes. See how that is all one piece of fabric. The only thing that we have here is where we did those double stitches right along there. But the top of your toe, smooth. Okay, so for me on here, I'm just going to go through this little section right here. Now I'm going to swoop back around. Okay, so now that's weaved in. I can go ahead and snip that. Sock puppet. Okay, hold on. Go Chiefs! I love this color because it reminds me of my team, the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, now we've got it back to the right side. We need to block our socks. And we will be using the One Big Happy sock blockers. And they are adjustable by size. I've gone ahead and set mine up to the size that I like. I went ahead and sewed them through these holes with some scrap yarn and my tapestry needle to hold it in place. This piece comes out and you can adjust it to whatever size you want. But so I've got my sock blockers. Let me grab my room temperature water. You can put a little bit of wool wash in here. You want to use a low sud detergent of some sort, even baby shampoo. I like to use soak, but whatever you like, this is where you do it. It's the kind that has like conditioner in it to keep it from setting up. Then you're going to need your towel. I'm going to lay my towel out to block my sock. I just simply put it in the water. Now, you really want to let this soak for about 30 minutes. Well, they say 15. 15. I usually soak mine for 30 minutes just to be on the safe side. But the reason for that is because you want the water to get into all the fibers. The reason why we block is so that our fibers will relax and bloom. You really only have to do this one time, the first time, right after you knit them, to get all of those fibers into position. And then after that, this is a super wash. You can wash and dry this in your washing machine. I know, crazy, isn't it? But, I mean, really, when you make a pair of socks, like, do you really block them every time? If you do, leave a comment below because I'd really like to know, because personally, I block them the first time, and then after that, they just get in my laundry. And I've made probably hundreds of pairs of socks, and they all go through the washing machine. But now that I've got this all nice and wet, again, we don't want to wring. We want to just grab and squeeze because we don't want to distort our stitches. Get it all there. And also, too, one thing I want to point out, when you're using a wool wash and you're blocking your socks, the texture of your socks changes. They become so soft when you're done. Okay, so I'm laying this out on my towel. Same way as we block everything else, we need to wick the water out. So we're going to roll it up in our towel. We're going to squeeze the towel. It's going to take the friction off of our sock. It's going to wick out all that extra water. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Okay, here we go. Look at that. And you can already tell that the texture of the yarn is changing. It's becoming softer. And then when it dries, it becomes fluffier and prettier, and your stitches are all nice and even. You slide your sock blocker into your sock. And it has this nice little hanging hook right here that you can hang to dry, or you can just, like, for me at home, what I did was I put these up on my bookshelf and just kind of leaned them like that on my bookshelf, and they dried really quick. But that way I could keep them away from the kids, because my kids love my knitting. It's so super sweet. Okay, slide it on there, hang it up, let it dry overnight. As you can see, this is stretching it out. Let this dry, and then you're good to go. Thank you for joining me in knitting these One Big Happy Toe-Up socks. I really enjoyed sharing this style and sharing with you my favorite tips and tricks. Remember, you can get a kit with the yarn and the pattern at onebighappy.com. Be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell to be notified every time we have a new video. Happy knitting!